Hey, how goes it? Ken Bozak here to talk about Bitcoin and Bitcoin accessories. And today we're streaming with strangers. Today's stranger is our friend Amber Scott from OutlierCanada.com. How goes it?
Very well. Super glad to be on with you.
Appreciate you. I spotted Doge. I spotted
I
Doge back
know.
there. Ah, I love
We
how the
have,
Doge is so prominent in Canada. Is there a reason for that? Like why is Doge so highly prominent in Canada of all places around the world?
I think crypto in general, like Canada just has some really great devs. We have a community that's really hyped about things, and Doge generally is awesome and fun. I think as Canadians, we like to have fun. We like to have a laugh, and
I can
Doge is great.
I can see that. Yeah, Canada is like a blast. I mean, you have to have a sense of humor to survive those fucking winters. I was just up there and it was like, you want to talk about polar whatever the heck that crap is, like just go to Canada on a Tuesday. It doesn't matter which one. Just go. And there you go. You got your polar vortex. It's just the Tuesday in Canada. But I mean that's where you hail from, right? You're calling in from Canada. Let everybody
I
know a little
am.
bit about yourself. Maybe who you are, how you got into this, cryptocurrency thing, and how that led you to do what it is, whatever it is that you're doing in the industry today.
Sure. So I've always been a big compliance geek, and I founded my company Outlier in 2013. It's a compliance consulting company. So in essence, like we just try to keep people out of trouble.
Nerd alert.
Um, Huge nerd alert, and I'm super comfortable with that. So in the same year that I founded the company, a friend of mine who was doing payment processing phoned me up, and he was like, "Hey, we're doing all this processing for a Bitcoin exchange. It's turning into a lot of our volume. Can you update my risk assessment?" Which is the risk that it's a huge document that talks about the risk that your business could be used to launder money or finance terrorism. And I said, yeah, I don't really know a lot about Bitcoin. I'd read about it in Wired at the time, but that was it. So I don't understand things unless I play with them. I have to
Mm.
touch them. I have to do things. So I
Hands
said, can
on.
you, yeah. So I said, can you pay my retainer in Bitcoin? And he was like, yeah, it's not like anything that you've ever dealt with before. I'm going to send you a couple of articles before I'm ever going to send you Bitcoin. So he's like, Thursday, I'm going to send you articles. Monday, you have to call me and tell me, that you have a wallet, that you understand some security basics, or I'm not sending it to you. So Thursday night, I started reading. I stayed up way too late. Friday, I might have canceled some meetings because I was still reading and
Oh,
super
the
psyched
rabbit
about it.
hole begins.
Saturday, I got in a fight with my husband because I canceled some plans. And Monday, I called up my friend and I was like, yeah, okay, and he's like, are you ready? And I'm like, no, but I have a wallet. I think I understand the security basics. Let's do this. And it was just really exciting. It was like nothing that I'd ever touched before in the financial world. And I consider myself relatively savvy, but the idea that you can actually have full control and full sovereignty over an asset that isn't physical is a fucking game changer. Like that, it's so big in so many ways, and it has the potential to do such tremendous good in the world. So I was excited about it. And everyone always asks because that was a long time ago. Did you keep that Bitcoin? And like, no.
No,
I
I
had
mean, not many
I,
people
I had to
did.
transact, right? I had to do transactions. I had to get it. I had to see how exchanges
I mean, it
work.
was
I
your
had to,
paycheck. You had to pay rent. I get it.
yeah, yeah. I had to get some filthy fiat and pay rent. I had to buy something. Like I had to understand merchant transactions. So I bought a tablet, which was promptly forgotten on an airplane. Good decisions. I know, right? And like when I think about it in today's Bitcoin value, I'm just like, that was a really expensive tablet.
I live that life
Um,
though. I mean, if I don't spend Bitcoin, I don't eat at all. It's all I have. I'm all in on crypto. I choose not to hold any fiat whatsoever unless I have to interact with my rent or something. And even then, I'll use a means of spending that crypto either peer to peer or through some form of third party exchange to get a money order or some means to pay rent. But I look at what I paid last year in rent in Bitcoin and the year before and the year before, and I'm just like, but that's just the mentality of currency that we never had before, right? Like, the longer we hold our money, the more it becomes valuable. Like that's completely new mentality. We've never had that. We've always been kind of inspired to spend that money sooner rather than later because you're only going to get less stuff. I mean, we've heard it our whole lives. A gallon of milk used to be a nickel, and I'm like, oh shit! I hope it ain't $20 tomorrow. I better get a gallon right now. And that's our
but do you
mentality.
feel like I'm 40 and I have those moments where I'll go somewhere and look at the price of something and I'm like, oh, remember this?
Yo, I don't think I've seen a quarter bag of chips in a
Mm.
fortnight. You know, to be millennially punny.
Nice.
I haven't,
Nice.
you know, and it's not getting any better. You know, when I go out to shop, even for toiletries and things like that are necessities that you replenish on a weekly, it goes up weekly. It's like insanely fast how expensive things become over 52 weeks if you really start to look at the things that you have to reoccurringly purchase, like toiletries or eggs, bread, milk, things like gas. Like it goes up a lot faster than your you know, your wage increase. You're spending more making less and spending more time making less, and it costs more to work more. It's not like it's beneficial to be at work 60 hours a week. You're gonna have to hire a babysitter or X, Y, and Z, and transport. It balances out to be a net negative, if anything. So it's a crazy world we're living in where people are just conditioned to it, you know. But like I want to segue back to a little bit about what you're doing now in the industry with
Sure.
Outlier and that whole nerd alert we rang earlier. It sounds like you're like the
You're the
hall
nerd pal.
monitor for fucking blockchain. Hey, where's your hall pass? You have a third party audit, young man. Um, you know,
We do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's important, and a lot of people don't consider that as even a criteria for a viable product or an option for part of the due diligence of, you know, doing their own research is looking for third party audits, right? So what does Outlier do? What is their goal, and how do they achieve their goal?
I think for us, it's always the goal is to have clients that we like working with. So I love working with entrepreneurs. I love working with people in the Bitcoin space because they're excited about what they're doing and they're solving real problems. And my goal is just to help those businesses succeed and be viable. So that means to understand the things that you have to do from a compliance perspective, to have a good compliance program in place, to have an audit, and the thing I always mention there, if we built your compliance program for you, we can't do your audit. Like you can't be QA for your own work.
Oh, so you're telling me so Coinbase shouldn't have done their own investigation on the insider trading of the listing of BCH? I totally understand that logic.
Finding an auditor for some of these things is really hard,
I
though.
would
Like,
recommend Hosho, right? Have you heard of them?
yeah, yeah. Hartej is awesome.
Yo, see, she knows her shit, guys. She knows her shit.
Yeah, like there are companies like that are coming up to fulfill the need. But then there's an interesting thing too, where we have a lot of traditional companies that are doing some work in the space, and some of them are amazing, and some of them are not, and it really depends on who's on a project and who's working on it.
How do we
So
audit the third-party auditors to find out the credibility of the people extending credibility?
get credentials. So I think anyone that you're hiring to do something like that, you should be asking about who they are, about what they're doing.
She
One
said a
of the
boot.
funniest. Oh, I don't notice the Canadian accent. You can laugh every time.
No,
I
I
don't.
love it. I miss Canada. I miss all my Canadian Canucks. It was just a breath of fresh audio.
Nice. Well, I'm about to say it again. Well, so when you're looking at who's doing the work for you, like one of the funniest things I've ever seen on a panel is like Ileana one day was on a panel where there was a bunch of experts sort of talking about their blockchain solutions and what they could do for various companies. And they asked everyone on the panel, well, like, do you hold Bitcoin? Do you hold every cryptocurrency? Does your company hold any cryptocurrency? No, 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 no. And at the end of it, she's like, well, of course I do. I personally hold several. The company holds some, because you have to have skin in the game. You have to transact. You have to understand how it's working. So I think that's sort of the number one thing. And it's one of the things that I say to other traditional vendors when they get in touch with me and say, like, how do I do things in blockchain? How do I get into Bitcoin? Get some Bitcoin. Play with it. Like if you're not interacting with Bitcoin, if you're just trying to sell things to Bitcoiners, it's kind of a dick move, but it's disingenuous. So
Right.
you're never going to know your stuff. You're never really going to be an expert.
No, I
But the other
totally
bit is,
agree. But I mean, I could play devil's advocate to that if you didn't mind, and which
yeah,
I
do it
totally
up.
agree with you. But again, some people may not, and this may be more for the investors, right? Like I said this on the Robert Beatles podcast before. You know, companies didn't do business things. You know, a lot of these companies like Steam and EOS and ETH and all these companies that are like, you know, laying off employees and kind of dismantling projects because they didn't hedge into fiat, right? Because they were too invested in their own technologies rather than investing in a security into a secure fiat, you know, currency to pay off their rent and pay their employees in hindsight. So I agree with you, but then again, if you're a business, you may not want to take that risk. You may want to be more approachable in an institutional appeal. But I think that they should have the skin in the game.
I don't think you need to be all in, but I think you need to have touched it. I think you need to have some skin in the game and some understanding, and then those traditional skills matter too. So if you're hiring someone to do a computer forensic audit, they need to have that background.
So it can't just be their first job. I start in blockchain auditing today. That's just what I do.
That's just, yeah, you know, I've thrown it up. I sort of read through the CCSS standard on
I read
GitHub,
the white
and
paper
I think I'm down with
twice.
it. Yeah, it's good. It's fine. You know, they should actually have credentials. And whenever you're hiring someone, if they can't give you a CV, if they can't give you references, if there's nothing that you can research, that should be a red flag. And I'll say this, you know, like even with bigger companies, so there are really great teams like within Deloitte, within KPMG, within all of the big firms where there's people that really understand things. And if you're hiring one of those firms, ask for the CVs of people who are going to be working on your project. And if you do that, you're more likely to get the people that are most qualified within your domain because they want to put those people forward. So I think that's one of the funniest tricks about hiring consultants, like make sure you know who's actually on it and that they're not just throwing bodies at it.
Exactly. And there's a lot of companies out there that, you know, will say that they audit other companies, so they audit themselves. What are your thoughts on things like that? Where like they are a third-party auditor for other companies, so they've decided to use that wing of the company to audit themselves.
Yeah, so you can theoretically do that in a bunch of different contexts. So like banks, for instance, will have an internal audit department that does certain things, and then they'll have external audit that does certain things. So I think in a lot of those cases where people are saying we're auditing ourselves, you really have to look for, do you have the right degree of separation? So is there someone who can be like, no, I hired you, here's what you're going to write?
Right.
And sort of what does that look like? Do they really have independence?
My only thought would be like, what about, you know, somebody auditing your smart contract and your source code? It may not be open source yet, or even patent or trademarked, and then worrying about that leaking, or, you know, what if that person that has a malware where their computer is, you know, vulnerable to a hacker who now stole that intellectual property. I just worry about the risk aversion, right, of using third-party auditors, like the risk reward. Like, is there any, like I mentioned, like, is that like a worst case scenario tinfoil hat, or is that something that's liable to happen?
So I mean, I think it's unlikely, but when people hire us to do compliance audits, there are whole processes that mature companies have that say, like, where is our data going to be kept? Where are your servers? What are your security protocols? What encryption are you using? And we have to go through that process, and they vet us based on that. And if we don't meet their standards, they won't hire us. So I think that's part of it. You have to know where someone is keeping your data. You have to know where they're accessing it. And honestly, if you're really paranoid about it, you can have them come into your site and work on your machine. So there are definitely sites where I'm doing audit work where they give us auditor access to their systems, but I'm never actually porting any of their data onto any of our machines or any of our servers.
So if I was that company,
like,
I wouldn't
on my own laptop, but that's it.
Right, I wouldn't have to worry about any of my users' data being exposed and leaked or anything like that. So my customers are not at risk. At worst case scenario, I am at risk, but my customers are safe through the barrier.
Exactly. But with code audits, I think that I don't actually do code audits, and like I should put that out there. But I think the most interesting critique that I've heard, especially when it comes to smart contracts, is that there aren't enough people at this stage that really have the expertise to do the code audit. So the idea is that I should never be auditing a program or a piece of code that I don't understand, that I couldn't have programmed. So I need to have a high level of knowledge, and I'm auditing things that are within that spectrum. So a lot of times when it's a very new technology, you don't have enough people that are really qualified to audit or understand what the code is actually doing. So when you look
100%.
at some of the things that have happened, like parody,
Yeah, the parody wallet hack,
like,
guys. Definitely look into that because that was an event. Fortunately, we had a whitehead hacker hack it back, so that was a
yeah,
great, and that's a good thing to look into and learn. There's a lot to be learned in that parody wallet hack. So if you're new to the space, history lessons, people, history lessons. Go back and learn our history. But that is a great point that you bring up. It is really sketchy right now, but I kind of want to segue into like outliercanada.com and who the target demographic is, right? Like who is the customer, or the end user for Outlier Canada? Like who should be using you right now? Is it Canadian customers, worldwide? Are they blockchain or not? Cryptos, ICOs? Like what exactly do you
yeah.
appeal to?
So we work in Canada. So we're Canadian specifically. We do have a partner in the US that we work with, as well as other folks in the US that we refer to. But one of the things in tech is that tech is instant and global, but compliance is very local. And so in terms of my expertise, that's really within the realm of Canada, Canadian regulation. We work with reporting entities for anti-money laundering. We work with entities for privacy. So in Canada, we've worked with a lot of exchanges, with a lot of brokerages, with BTMs. And in a lot of cases, those aren't actually regulated entities yet. I should mention that. There's a lot of voluntary compliance happening.
Self-regulation is what she meant.
Yeah. So, well, and in some cases,
it's close
like,
to self-censorship. That's what I worry about.
I think that in a lot of those cases, it's looking at it and saying, well, if we want to have fiat on-off ramps, we're going to deal with banks and we're going to deal with payment processors, and they have regulatory requirements and they don't want to deal with anybody who's not meeting that same standard. So they want to know that you have something in place to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing, to protect customer privacy. And so they're looking for those more formalized programs as a way of proving that. And in some cases, you have companies that are doing other activities where they're considered regulated in our context.
So
we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Like,
yeah.
I think the Canadian context is much more cohesive than the U.S. context right now, where there's state-by-state legislation.
Yeah, the government's more involved with the blockchain legislation and regulations as like blanket. Right now in the US we have states fighting with each other, similar to like cannabis in the US, where each state has a different thing that is just really screwing up the country as a whole, where Canada is just blanket follows. I'm just curious, right now one of the biggest topics is Quadriga. So is there anything that Outlier Canada could have done to potentially have prevented or raised any red flags that Quadriga may not have been in access to these keys, or that there was no multi-sig in place? Like, what could have Quadriga done differently, or what could have outliercanada.com done for Quadriga to have prevented such a catastrophe?
I think this is a really hard one. So I knew Jerry. I liked Jerry quite a lot. I thought he was a really funny dude. Quadriga as a business was always outside of my risk tolerance, because whenever I look at anyone that I potentially work with, I do due diligence. And so I'll look at it and say, what's in the background? Who owns this? Is it something I want to work with? So they've always been outside of my risk tolerance. And I think there's something really funny where, although they were outside of my risk tolerance, although I knew that there was a co-founder that had some criminality in his background, or I suspected that. I mean, I'm not the police. I can't actually pull it up and say, yeah, this is definitely the same dude. But they were a Canadian exchange, and they were doing things that I thought were good things in the community. So even though I saw some red flags, it wasn't enough to jump out and say, I think this is a fraud. I think this is a scam. I don't know that anyone could have known that until it was too late.
A scam isn't
without being a real
it
insider.
scams, Like, people would even say that with BitConnect. If it was still running to this day, it wouldn't have been a scam until it scams. So, it's really, you're right. It's hard to say definitively something is a scam in the industry until it fails or exits. Otherwise, as far as we know, they're trying their best.
Yeah, and like that one's hard. And I know that a lot of people that have been in the industry for a long time are like, oh, what could we have done, or should we have blown the whistle? Should we have called it out? But I,
Were there any
I
third-party audits involved with Quadriga? Did they have a company that they were
I
having?
don't I don't think so.
What was so appealing about them? Because I mean, not some, pretty much every U.S. Viewer I have asks me about like what was so appealing about this exchange. Nobody knows about it. Nobody heard about it. It wasn't like Coinberry or Netcoins or anything semi big, but it had 100,000 active users with 26,000 Bitcoin valued at almost $200 million. Like, what was so appealing about this pretty sketchy exchange?
So I think their prices were generally really good. Like there was something there in terms of how they price things that was always really appealing to traders. And I think in particular, like people that were doing arbitrage between different exchanges and things like that. Like they had good deals for folks. They had like Jerry was always at events in Toronto. He had spoken at a lot of things. He'd been in the community for a long time. And I think with exchanges, there's really something like when there's physically a person that you can go and talk to, and if you have a problem, you can send them a DM, and that's a big deal to people, right? It was never a nameless, faceless thing, and so that was always part of their branding and their trust. And they made an announcement, I think in 2015 or 2016, where they had talked about going public. So they doing not an ICO, but a full-on IPO and trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange.
And that's common in Canada. Actually, there's quite a bit of Canadian companies that are crypto that trade publicly, and Netcoins is one of them.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not surprising to me in retrospect that they didn't do that, because there is a shit ton of due diligence that goes into those processes, and maybe they started that and realized they wouldn't, they wouldn't make it through. I don't know. But that after that, it just suddenly went silent. But I think that's one of the things that probably served to build a lot of trust in the community, was that they did talk about that.
Yeah, it looks like it was one of the comments right here says that it was one of the only exchanges in Canada, or was the only exchange in Canada, that you can withdraw crypto to fiat. Oh, interesting. And I mean, again, I don't know. I don't get the. I try to use Coinberry because they're pretty awesome, and they've supported meetups that I've hosted in Canada, and there's a lot of awesome meetups. Do you attend any conferences or meetups in Canada? Because some of my favorite, I've been to 50 in 2018, and they were in Canada.
Oh my gosh.
Some of my favorite ones, like Toronto, Alberta, Vancouver, Quebec, and Ontario, Montreal. I mean, I went to pretty much every province almost to attend an event in Canada, and they were amazing events. Have you been to any?
Quite a few, yeah. Are you coming out to Bitcoin Rodeo?
I was there last year. Yeah, they actually flew me out and had me and BTC Benny kind of
Nice.
like, he hosted it. I kind of like was his Andy, kind of like running around on the floor, like, talking to people while he was on stage. It was really cool. Bitcoin Rodeo was fun, man. The only thing though is the last year is I don't know what came of the platinum sponsor, Oilium. I don't know if they actually ended up becoming like one of those exit scam ICO companies or not. I haven't heard much of them. And when I attend events, I actually do kind of keep an eye on the platinum sponsors of them to see like somewhat of the integrity of the events, even when they're accepting money of these companies to promote them. So I'm actually looking into a lot of the conferences I attended, the companies that were platinum sponsors and where they're at today, to see what has come of it.
So my understanding with them is they're still working on it. They're still plugging away.
Okay.
Although I want to loop back to a question that you asked me earlier, because we actually, just in terms of who we support, and I should say publicly, we don't support ICOs. It was just a thing.
What's your take on STOs then?
I think that eventually STOs are going to be awesome. Like, just in terms of, like, people need to figure out how to do them in a way that's compliant. And I think there's a little bit of give and take. There's a lot of projects that are working on that right now. And I know probably some mutual frustration on the part of securities regulators and
Oh
people
yeah.
that are going through and doing those sandbox projects.
It's
They're
going to be
just like,
easy though. I know it is. They just don't understand the technology enough to apply the protocols to secure their regulations. Now, if they understood smart contracts and whitelisted addresses, they could make it KYC compliant to where that if I were to go through a KYC process, get a security token, they wouldn't have to worry as much about the private key even being able to be swept into a wallet that wasn't a whitelisted wallet, which means that it was compliant with the KYC on the blockchain. So the keys will never move. I could expose my private keys on the internet, and only somebody that has a whitelisted address will be able to sweep those private keys for the security token. It just
that's an interesting fraud control at the same time. Yeah.
it's there's so many. If they just don't have enough foresight and they drug test their R&D department out of existence, really. I mean, I think they
We don't do that in Canada. So I worked for a U.S. company at one point, and our U.S. legal sort of got in an argument with our Canadian legal about it. And like, it's a financial company, right? So I'm not like driving a bus full of children. And what they'd sort of called us all into a closed room meeting, like everyone that worked in the Canadian division, and they were like, hey, if you're in the U.S. and you get called up for a drug test, your marching orders, I don't care if you do drugs or if you don't do drugs, get on the next plane and come back to Canada. Because it's in such conflict with our laws here and your right to privacy outside of certain very specific roles.
Yeah.
So if you're a bus driver, if you're operating heavy machinery, you know, things where there's an actual danger, you can be drug tested.
But that goes
yeah,
without saying. I mean, there's a
just
lot
sort
of
of-
jobs that require that, even for like, you know, alcohol. You can't drink at all ever. You know, if you get you know, urine tested and you have alcohol in your system from yesterday because you partied last night, you're probably going to get fired. That goes for like Teamster truck drivers that are in the union, things like that require like, you know, a lot of hours of or, you know, importance. Like, you know, surgeons used to be able to get away with it, and pilots, until they started enforcing these things. But it's really, like you said, it's not a life or death scenario, and it's really at your own discretion. I mean, if you were to drink alcohol, which is completely legal, and you can't do your job, you're going to get fired. And if you can't, you know, recreationally indulge with, you know, moderation, you're probably going to lose your job. It's up to you. But I've actually heard of a lot of people in Canada having problems entering the U.S. because they're publicly invested in cannabis stock companies in Canada. So if you're invested in cannabis companies as a Canadian, the U.S. has the right to refuse you entry to the country, and that has to do with the company owners and employees of cannabis companies. So if you're a dispensary owner, you're probably not allowed to enter the U.S.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, Canadian border guards can be dicks sometimes too, and I think that's like, so much is rolling the dice in terms of who you get and how they feel about something that day.
I've been
Because,
secondary
I
searched
mean,
every time. Every single time I've entered your country or left your country, I've been secondary searched every time.
I wasn't kidding when I said we need to get you some airport camo. Like, we need to get you an outfit that's just like maybe a preppy little sweater and some dad jeans, and like that's what you wear to the airport.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like some straight up blend in normie clothes.
Yeah, just like, this is my Carlton. I only wear it at airports.
Carlton. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like, I get so nervous when I fly. The reason I go so myself in pajamas and everything is like to just feel more comfortable. Honestly, it's like I try to make myself as comfortable physically as possible, so when I'm there I can try to be mentally comfortable, because of like the harassment that I've been through at airports by security is just like, my anxiety is insane. Just thinking about it makes me sweat and stutter. Like, I can't. And then, you know, I've had problems. I almost got kicked off an airplane before I even got on it because I put a Bitcoin sticker on the airplane and they called it vandalism.
I saw that.
That was so stupid. That was just a reason to be a dick on their part. Like, I was so scared, dude. You don't even know. I was like, it's a sticker, peel it off, and they couldn't. And I was just like, oh, it's a good sticker, it's a good sticker. And then I got off the plane, and it was like a 4-hour flight, and it was still there. And I was like, that's a good sticker.
Yeah, that is a good sticker.
So I don't know.
Like, it's a plane though. You don't. I don't know.
Well,
I'm
I
sure you
back
have some
to
Bitcoiner friends that are pilots. Like,
Oh, dude, definitely.
you
I've
have had some
I've striking conversations like the whole plane at one point when I was on my flight to or no, my flight home from Dogecoin in Vancouver. I had the whole airplane talking about Bitcoin because like I was basically coming in from like crypto Mardi Gras. You know what I mean? It's like lights and stuff and Bitcoin everywhere, and they're like, "What the?" And I was like, Dogecoin, and I had Bitcoin like on my hat, lit and Bitcoin everywhere, and they were every time I went to the bathroom, I heard people talking about Bitcoin, so it was really cool, and it's why I kind of flaunt, Bitcoin when I go out a little bit, and especially when I travel. Every single time TSA, every time I'm secondary search, every time I interact with somebody that's at the airport, I am asked about Bitcoin, and only one time have they ever asked me to unlock my phone and computer for them to see my wallets, which thank God they didn't know shit about phones to find out which apps were actually wallets. They just opened my phone and really kind of went through every text message within the past 24 hours. Like 2 hours TSA or customs was reading text messages rather than, worried about anything else. It was weird, really invasive. But yeah,
so like we've gotten to a point when we fly that we actually have protocols about that, just because
you want to go through some of that security
we travel
there?
to a lot of different places, but what information is actually local to my machine is very minimalist now.
I actually have looked into law. If you use biometrics on your phone, they can force you legally to unlock your phone through the Freedom Act. But if you have a PIN number, they can't force you to remember the PIN number.
That's a great, right.
So if you don't use your retina scan, facial scan, or fingerprint to unlock your phone, and you only use a PIN number, if Customs or TSA or Homeland Security tries to force you to open your phone to see your crypto or whatever, they can't force you to remember the PIN number, but they can force you to put your fingerprint right there. So that's just one thing that you could do when you're traveling is turn off biometric locks, turn on PIN only just while you're traveling. That way you don't have to worry about TSA exposing your private keys to a security camera over their head, somebody working in the back taking your Bitcoin while you're on the flight to wherever. It's a real concern when you are your own bank. Third-party risk is serious. You don't want to ever expose those keys. I actually saw recently Apple iOS has allowed applications to secretly record your screen without having any alerts to your system. So this is so background that you had to really dig to find out that this was happening, but it was happening by a lot of these applications by default. They're just recording your screen constantly. So if you were to download a wallet, expose the private keys, write them down, back it up, make your phone all awesomely safe, there's an app somewhere on your phone like Candy Crush that has your private keys just waiting for that honeypot to be worth sweeping.
Oh, that's terrifying. But I think that's not just Apple, that's not just iOS. If you're ever sort of connected in a way where you can see how much data your phone is leaking, like this is leaking data right now and I haven't touched it since we started talking. And it's crazy when you look at that in terms of the traffic that's going through. If you map it and look at the devices that it's coming from.
Yeah, exactly.
And what
well,
they're actually
what
doing.
devices moving forward?
Nuts.
Like, what are your thoughts on blockchain devices? Right, like blockchain OS based devices where the Linux is, Bitcoin's blockchain, right? And when we build on top of that, where the mobile device that we use today won't work unless we're connected to some form of the internet to sync to the blockchain to secure the encrypted data, to use your biometrics to unlock the private key, giving you access to the actual OS. Like, what are your thoughts on that moving forward? Because we have about 3 to 4 mainstream companies coming out with these blockchain devices just this year.
I think there might be some good applications eventually. The first instances of it make me nervous on a couple of sort of tracks, and like one of those is scalability.
That's a good
so
point.
when you think about sort of what are you putting on this blockchain and what do you actually have to sync, what does that look like? The initial probably proof of concept, like super cute. Once upon a time, I could sync Ethereum on my MacBook.
I love this girl. This is the best podcast.
But that's true, right? That's true.
You're right.
Like if I try to do that today, it's like, maybe 2 months from now, if you run no other programs, this will happen. But it's not happening. And the other part of that is what's the nature of that blockchain? So I think we throw the name blockchain at everything, But like, if what you mean by it is an immutable public ledger, immutable and public being super important qualities to think about, what data do you really want there? Do I want my fingerprint permanently, unchangeably, irrevocably in the public domain?
If it's encrypted and only able to be exposed as a fingerprint rather than gibberish via a private key or a signature, like if I gave my business permission to access my fingerprint on the blockchain, I would just sign a message with my private key and send that message to your public address, giving you access to that data. Right, but I mean that public immutable information is encrypted.
This gets into something else, because again, you're talking about like encryption. You're talking about something that looks like zero knowledge proofs or something similar,
yes.
where you're not actually transmitting that specific data. So I feel the same way about, you know, KYC projects, when people are like, we're putting all of this KYC on the blockchain, and I'm like, cool, are you using zero knowledge proofs? And if they stare at me blankly, then I just have to discontinue.
Yeah.
Because
right,
like, why do you want to put all this personal information about someone in the public domain? It starts to get a little bit crazy town.
It's Equifax
like,
2.0 in the happening. It's a
well,
Mount
it's
Gox
Equifax that you opt into, right?
Right,
like
right.
It's, I mean, when I have no choice, Equifax has my data. They get breached. I've lost my data. Haven't we all? You know,
Yeah.
it's out there.
3 out of 4 people.
But when they talk about these KYC projects, those are something that your users are then opting into. And I'm not at a point where I think that I would opt into something that's going to put my personal data in the public domain unless I really understood what they were doing from a privacy and security standpoint to protect that.
Yeah, and that's hard because they don't even know what to do as from a privacy standpoint to protect you. You know, I mean, we're so early in this game where I tell people we got to stop begging for mainstream adoption right now, because if we got it, they wouldn't like it, and it would leave a sour taste in their mouth. And we've seen that throughout 2018, that sour taste of forced mainstream, like force feeding mainstream adoption to these institutional companies, where this tech is just not ready yet. And that's fine. Like, that's okay. It's okay that Bitcoin isn't ready yet for mainstream adoption. We still have at least 3 major leaps to make before we even get close. And that, in my opinion, is atomic swaps, lightning channels, and smart contracts on the Bitcoin blockchain. And that creates the ability for tokenizing assets on Bitcoin's blockchain, very similar to Ethereum's and many other things. And I gotta say, guys, we gotta stop force feeding mainstream adoption. We gotta start force feeding mainstream attention and understanding, right? Just start pushing the foundational educational layer, right? Like, what is a blockchain? What is immutability? Things to that effect.
I think it's hard to know as well exactly what those steps are going to be that are going to be super important. I think key management is probably one of those. And I think that in the way that I think that the internet is awesome. I definitely have people in my family that were not super hyped until these types of devices came out. So I was having a debate with a friend of mine about the importance of iPads the other day. And I think iPads are tremendously important, and probably not for you, but for my mom, that was amazing. That was the difference between her PC desktop computer that got some virus that she didn't understand and stopped working she literally had a guy that she would bring it to every 6 months. It'd be like, I don't know, fix it. And
used to do that right here for 6 years at Quick Fix Smartphone and Tablet
There you
Repair.
go. Yeah. So you were that guy, you know, like my mom would come and visit you and say, here's my computer, just fix it, get the viruses off it, tell me what I need now. And that's a very different experience for her with the iPad. Yep. Because it's, you know, it's a more locked down environment. It's not getting sick in the same way. She's able to use it. And that makes her comfortable doing things that she wasn't comfortable doing before. So, you know, maybe not doing a ton of banking transactions, but checking her balance. You know, looking at the prices of things, using messenger services.
Right, living a digital life, you know, having an extension of a physical life.
Yeah, and those weren't things that she was comfortable with prior to that device. And I think the iPad was more important than the phone just because of the ability to have bigger fonts, bigger icons. You know, that bigger screen led to more comfort in terms of interacting with the device. And I think in terms of key management, like there are really cool things that we're starting to see. Like YubiKey is really neat, KeepKey is really neat. They're still not super easy to use.
Yeah, and they
And like
have a
I think whenever I
lot
hear
of
devs say like
problems.
just fucking learn command line, that's great. And my ability to
They
script
stopped
when we do
teaching
something is not
cursive.
usability.
They stopped teaching cursive in public schools. And you want people to learn command line? What?
But I mean that's a problem. If we keep that asymmetry, if we keep that knowledge gap, that does really interesting things in the long term socioeconomically.
You're right, and you know what? With that,
So
with your mention of how important that iPad is, I think that is how important a blockchain OS based device will be because of those like you said, the viruses that your mom used to get are not like anything she's ever gotten now. She has a great experience. Except we've seen a 15-year-old find an exploit in FaceTime that allowed anybody access to your FaceTime that knew about the back door. Anybody. It doesn't sound like an exploit. It sounds like a backdoor, and that's what I will
did you
continue
feel
to
better
call
when
it.
it was just the government? I mean,
No, well, you know what though? I feel like that was
NSA.
such a big event that it conditioned people and desensitized them to this even happening. It's almost like a non-event, right? It's like I've been raped so foully by the government that this sexual offense doesn't even faze me. But you should feel violated vulgarly by what Apple has done with this vulnerability in FaceTime, but people don't care. But like I was saying, the vulnerabilities we have now, and especially with that background screen capturing ability, the importance of a blockchain based OS device that keeps everything in house, that doesn't share so much data, is really important when
Yeah.
it comes to key management. Because if you're trying to manage your keys on a smartphone, a computer, XYZ, honestly, there's only, and I found absolutely one way to create a secure way to make your Bitcoin offline, and that is taking blockchain or bitaddress.org offline on a flash drive, upload or plugging it into a computer that has never touched the internet, loading the browser offline from the saved file, creating that through their random encryption mouse tracking thing, and then BIP
Okay.
138 encrypting that private key as well with a password. That way, if the private key is ever exposed, you have at least a BIP 138 encrypted, and then you take that computer and you burn it. Because if anybody got their hands on it, they could do keystroke sniffing, and they could go back in time and find out what keystrokes were made, and then they could figure out that the password is X to the private key. So, like, it is super, super, super difficult to manage your private keys with 100% confidence. Because even using a hardware wallet, when they update, you have to have your private keys to resync the blockchain, because they got rid of the private keys when they update it because of the exploit that they patched. And that exploit, if you don't update, I could get your hardware wallet, I could kill you, I could hang on to that hardware wallet until an exploit is found, choose not to update it, and choose to exploit that exploit, and then have your cryptocurrency. So, I mean, there's just so many honeypot scenarios that I see 100% why institutional money has never moved in, because they're not using their own money. They're not responsible for their own money. And that money is in the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars that they have to know without a doubt that that money is secure.
Yeah, that's valid. I think there's probably a difference in terms of what an institution holding billions of dollars has to do, and what I have to do. And not that I'm advocating for security through obscurity, but it's a very different honeypot.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I find wonderful and terrifying is whenever I get to hang out with people that are white hat hackers and super crazy OpSec experts, because they have these conversations about like, could you design a completely fail-proof system? And you get into, well, no, technically I could point this thing at your window and I could actually tell from the vibration of you hitting the keys what key. And I'm like, oh, and like the best thing that anyone's ever said to me is like Jeff Coleman turned around to me one day and I'm like, you're terrifying, man. And he's like, Amber, the good thing is it would cost at least $100,000 to do what I just said. So like, as much as, yes, that thing is terrifying, for anyone to do that, they have to, A, have the money to do that spend, B, be willing to do that spend and think that they're going to get more than that out of it, like at that particular time. So it's really unlikely, other than these very specific targeted attacks that happen. But the more that you have something, the more that you're public about it, the more that you get to have fun and be paranoid, and start implementing a greater degree of controls.
Ooh,
Like what?
I want to dive down the paranoia rabbit hole with you, and how do you, as maybe a customer or a company or an investor, and obviously not investment advice, but like as personal opinion, outside of the outliercanada.com business, how do you personally vet a company that you're interested in, even though you're not hired to, or the company's not using their resources? Just as an individual, what can you do to kind of spot some of these risks that companies are either taking precautions to prevent or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think just do due diligence. Like, look at what's there.
But what does that mean,
I
right? When
so
people hear that and they're not from this industry, that might as well be abracadabra alakazam.
so like this is one of the crazy things. And I've talked to people about like some of the ICOs that they invested in, where I'm like, well, did you look at any of their stuff? And they're like, no, I just threw some ETH or some Bitcoin at it. And I'm like, would you give a traditional company like money without sort of looking at them? And they're like, well, no, but don't get excited. Like, don't get caught up in the FOMO. Like, that's number one. You have to stay calm. You have to stay rational about it. If something doesn't seem to have good fundamentals, so when I look at something from just personally from an investment perspective, from like, I think I would like to invest in this. It doesn't matter to me if it's in crypto. It doesn't matter to me. I have traditional investments as well. I'm looking at it to say, number one, do I think this thing is solving a real problem? And if the answer is no, I give zero damns how excited anybody else gets about it. Like, if I don't get it, that's not for me. And I think that that's important, because I don't do day trading. I'm not interested in that. I find it super stressful. Some people love it. I'm not one of those people, and that's okay.
My hair used to be brown, and then I day trade it.
Dun, dun, dun. But yeah, like I think like understand it, and then just basic things like Google it. When I say like Quadriga was always outside of my risk tolerance, that wasn't because I did 50 hours of research. That was because I did a little bit of research and went, oh shit. And then I just brought two things to one of my colleagues and said, can you look at this and tell me if I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing? And that colleague came back and said, oh shit. and that was that. So look beyond page one on Google. Like, look at who the founders are.
Right, right. Look into the founders. Absolutely. If the founder was a fry cook and they're doing an ICO for blockchain healthcare solutions, that's a red flag, everybody.
Yeah, don't do it. Google the word, like just the name of the thing you're looking at. So if I'm like, Ambercoin is great, Google Ambercoin scam, Ambercoin fraud. Like, and then Google the names of the founders with scam and fraud.
Oh, there was one that came out a while ago that was so ironic. I can't remember the name, but it was I think it was like a sex enhancement drug name. It was like a pill, a name of a pill, and they used the same name of the pill as their ICO, and they put up like a Rick Roll video on their website, like, oh, we got you, haha. It was like a drug name anyway, nobody understands, and it was like, wow, if you would have just done a minute of research, you would have found out that they stole a name from a company that was a boner pill. Like, come on, guys. Just do a little bit of Google searching, like she said, and, you'd be better off. But it really, I think you hit the nail on the head with looking into the team. Who's the founder? Who's the lead dev? And are these people anonymous or are they public? And even if they are anonymous, are the synonymous identities reputable in the industry? It doesn't have to be your real name to be a developer in the space. A lot of people, even with Monero, they work anonymously, but they still have a public reputation. So you can look into these things and really avoid, supporting something that may be malicious or foul in the end. And like you said, it starts with just doing
the other thing you can do, if they are those really like high profile personalities, like you can literally tweet at them and say like, hey dude, are you actually an advisor for this project?
Oh shit, Leon Nielsen wasn't an advisor to that ICO? I should have asked.
Damn it. Well, that's a really interesting thing. Like, one of the things I find really fascinating is that Andreas Antonopoulos, if he becomes an advisor to a project, cannot be named publicly as an advisor to the project. And there are some exceptions to that from before he had that rule in force. So like he is actually an advisor to C4, but that's sort of the only one that I know where he's publicly named as, and they're not an ICO, right? They're not like, they're not a shitcoin. They're a standards and sort of training type of nonprofit. But if he's advising someone on their project, he can't be named publicly. So when I see something where I'm like, oh, Andreas is your advisor, tell me more, that's automatically kind of a scam alert to me.
Yeah.
And those popped up quite a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, I also have the devil's advocate's argument to that about Andreas, who I love and adore, but I have to speak for the opposite mind when they're not present. I mean, what if he was an advisor to projects that failed or exited or scammed, and now we don't know that he advised these projects, so now his reputation is untarnished? Does this, prevent credibility to a project and prevent a pump because he is so reputable? Or does this disdain his reputation from, and make it impervious to his decisions and actions in the space? That is the cost of, I would say the Spider-Man effect, right? With great power comes great responsibility. And I can see Andreas's reason for not wanting to be public, because it could affect something price-wise, and that could lead to probably legal problems if he were to be an investor in the project he's advising in, if that were to cause a influx in price. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons behind it, but I mean, I also want people to be, known for what they're advising and their roles in the industry are. So we have more of a public reputation.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I think it's, when I look at the risks of those two things, like everybody's advised a project that's failed at some point. Like I have clients that I work with that, that have run out of runway, like that have ceased doing business, and like it happens, right? I say often, like every day that you succeed as an entrepreneur is like a fuck you to everyone who told you that you couldn't do it that way and that you couldn't succeed. And you're beating the odds. Every day that you succeed, you are beating the odds. So we've all advised projects that failed. Projects that are scams, different story. But I think there is the funny thing that happens. And like one of the dumb things that I did as an investment is I have a friend who I think is really smart. And I was like, oh, he's advising on this board. And I just like threw some money at it, not really doing, like I didn't do the due diligence. And then the next time he and I went for drinks, he's like, we were talking about different projects. And he's like, yeah, I stand behind every project that I've advised on, except for that one. And I was like, oh shit. But what do you do, right? Like I really should have done the due diligence on it myself, and didn't.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that happens, especially in this crypto space with crypto YouTube, crypto Twitter, and things like that, where I'm just creating content, right? I'm just trying to make my conversations public in podcast form. I'm not trying to portray myself as an investor or a professional or financial advisor or anything in that nature. But, I have companies and projects that are cryptocurrencies or are an ICO or whatever the case may be, because I do this open platform podcast, and right. I do worry about that. But, I mean, it is what it is. I feel like that, again, is a form of self-censorship that I don't even want to enforce on myself, where you start to worry about, oh, if I have this person on, are people going to be upset that I promoted or supported or whatever? Like, you know what? Fuck that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to talk to everybody and give everybody the benefit of the doubt anymore, because it's so early in this space.
I mean, you're also like not offering the Ken Bozak Master Schiller Fund where you can.
Oh, you're not a part of my paid group? It's $420. $420 every 420 days, and every fourth day in the 20th week, we post trading material. It's it's the 420 paid group. It's really amazing. We have Cheech and Chong in there. They're trading. It's amazing.
Nice.
Yeah, no, you're right, and that's I don't know. It's just I see it with Andreas and that point and everything. I just wanted to be able to speak the devil's advocacy role, but
no, that's fair, and I get that. I think it's probably a hard balance, but I feel like there are a lot of people who would just like jump on something because, and then if it did turn out to be a project that should have failed,
It's Darwinism. I mean, that's
Yeah.
we're in a. I said this earlier. I hope I coined the term, but we're in an era of digital Darwinism.
Ooh,
It
I
is
like that.
it took place in a physical form in this reality already, and we have evolved as far as Darwinism physically could allow us. But now I think the true paradigm shift that this technology and this currency is really going to portray at the end of the day is an intellectual paradigm shift, where we're going to see, like I said, the digital era of Darwinism take place, where just we're using smart money now, and it will eventually, we'll have those do not eat, labels on rat poison bottles of crypto, which in my opinion are regulations and ICOs. If you regulate ICOs, that is a do not eat label on a bottle of rat poison. If you don't know better, you should probably process of elimination and not offspring yourself. Thank you for eliminating yourself out of the gene pool. Here is an ICO Darwin Award. You know what I mean? And I just feel like that is what's going to happen. And I don't want to coddle too many dumb people by dumbing down the tech. We shouldn't sacrifice the integrity of the technology and the security of the technology, the usability of the technology for the end user. We should educate and bring the end user up.
This is coming from someone who just said that not everybody's going to learn command line.
No, they're not. And the people that don't won't survive. They'll die off. They'll die off. Just like everybody that didn't understand how to live a modern lifestyle, the Neanderthals died off. They didn't want to live in houses. They wanted to live in huts. Winter came and killed them. This will happen in the form of a banking winter and a fiat form storm, and it'll happen. And I do not agree. I don't think everybody will learn how to program command line, but eventually the people left, they'll know it because it'll be common knowledge. Because they're the ones that survived, because they're the ones that knew. And it may not be a huge number. I read a recent article that we're all worried about global, climate change and all this and global warming and things, but has anybody ever taken into consideration in that the Earth may run out of people before it may become overpopulated? And I worry about that more than I worry about overpopulation now, because we're in a position that we're over coddled. There's a massive overpowerance of dumb people. The ratio of smart to dumb outweighs greatly, and there's just not enough smart people to be line leaders for those that aren't intellectually inclined enough to survive. That's why we're automating these remedial jobs like McDonald's cashiers. We don't need you anymore, and if you can't evolve up intellectually and contribute more to society, you're probably going to starve to death. And I don't agree with any of that. I'm just saying that that's the inevitable future that I foresee, and it sucks. I don't want to be cynical, but it is the future.
Have you watched Idiocracy lately?
Not lately, but I have watched it on psychedelics many times. And what I recommend, and this is advice. This is advice. Take psychedelic mushrooms, watch Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Idiocracy in any order, and then repeat the process in the opposite order. And look at how life could be day and night. Because that's how I saw it. We went from time machines and, robots that were depressed to a world of shit, or a world of shit to a world of time machines and robots that are depressed. So it could go either way.
One of the premises in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was that they took all of the shitty people and basically just put them on a ship where they were like, are you middle management? Are you just not contributing to anything except bureaucracy? Onto the boat, onto the boat, onto the boat. And they basically made this Noah's Ark of shitheads and just sent it off. And then it crash landed and they made their own society, and we evolved from that, which is kind of
that's a weird start for Australia if you look at it as well.
I love Australians.
Oh, me too. But I think that their history is like epic. It's almost like somebody wrote a movie about Australia and they decided to actually play it out in real life.
So, and I think that's an interesting thing, because there's a lot of intellectually very cool people in Australia. There's a lot of cool ideas that came out of there. So I think the part of it that we should be thinking about is, how do we make sure that we get to a point where we're able to foster people developing intellectually, where we're able to help people learn, where we're able to fix or heal some of the things that are wrong with the education system.
That's when I think the contributors outweigh the people in a position of need of help. When we have more people to help, then there are people that need help. And that's what I'm saying. We're in that opposite position. There's more people that need help that are in a position to help. And that comes from the 1% wealth gap. There's what, 26 people in the world that have more money than everybody else added up. That's disgusting. And and they're making billions of dollars daily, these 26 people. Billions of dollars daily. It is insane. It's just, and I think that Bitcoin actually disincentivizes that percentage wage gap significantly. And I don't think a lot of people in the industry are woke to that concept yet. They still look at Bitcoin as a way to make money. So they hold it. They don't want to spend it or use it. They want to poke it with a stick and hope it just does something else. Somebody else does something with it to make them make money out of it. And that's fiat, not more Bitcoin in the end. That's what everybody's looking at. But I don't think we're far away from that as well, especially with these blockchain-based devices. I mean, you have a Bitcoin wallet in your Brave browser by default. Opera browser, Bitcoin wallet by default. Eventually, Chrome will have it by default. I mean, this is going to become ipso facto, default, ubiquitous technology, and it will be boring. There won't be podcasts anymore. Probably conventions will be as fruitful as public service waste management conventions, because Bitcoin, blockchain, and everything will be basically looked at as a utility, and nobody will be as excited. And that's when we hit mainstream.
I think that'll be great in a lot of ways. Like, we're not having a podcast about using the internet, but that's what's connecting us, right? That's sort of the base layer that's making all of these things possible. And I think that when we talk about mass adoption, that's sort of it. People won't be talking about blockchains anymore.
Yep. Yeah, mass adoption is when you don't even know it's mass adopted. It just is. And what I would like to say,
it's just a thing that works.
And what I would like to say, though, is the people that are trying to day trade this and short Bitcoin and kind of hedge against that, is that parabolic bull run that will occur overnight will not be something you can chase. Look at where Bitcoin went from 1,000 to 20,000 and how fast that happened without institutional capital rolling in. And try to imagine catching a train that has nitrous in the tank on top of what we've seen last bull run. It's not going to be something that you're going to want to bet against. If you can afford to not, trade, then, try to just hold it, but use Bitcoin in another positive way other than trying to trade it, right? Like, I feel like I agree with Justin Burns. He was in a CNBC interview. He had the tiger paws on. He had lived in a treehouse. A lot of people saw that interview. It was amazing, and I love him. He is crypto as hell, man. But like, I don't even know where I was going with that. I got to wrap things up. I don't want to keep you too long. We're over an hour here. Why don't you let people...
Can I hit you with a question before we go?
Dude, please. I love that part.
So I'm fascinated by everyone who's just like living all crypto all the time. So we get paid in crypto. When we get paid in crypto, I'll pay my staff in crypto if they want that. And that's been a really fantastic experience, but I still have so many touch points with the fiat world. What's the biggest challenge for you? Like, what's the thing where you're like, this is still really hard to sort of live all Bitcoin all the time?
It's really not anymore. It's just the small sacrifices to my integrity, I would say. Like, I make integrity sacrifices a little bit when I use BitPay. That to me is a crypto integrity strike. What I strive for is actually, when I have to pay my rent, I want to sell Bitcoin, because that's what I earn, that's what I get paid in, that's what I store. My whole value is in crypto. So when I pay rent, yeah, I know it. I'm on fire. My podcast is lit. They send in the fire truck, baby. I'm the fire podcast man. I got to do something. I can't just keep talking with this happening. There's got to be... Gotta fill it with something. There we go. Go away. All right, where was I?
Crypto integrity.
Yes. So with BitPay, but what I strive for is, when I sell Bitcoin to pay my rent, is actually somebody who wants to invest in it as a store of value long term. So I'll go to a Bitcoin meetup, or I go to my local network where I established through conferences and meetups throughout 2018. And I'll be like, hey, I got paid. I need to pay rent. I know you're a long-term holder. You invest in this. Would you like to buy some Bitcoin from me personally so I can use that to pay rent, or, something like that? And my logic behind that is, rather than dumping on the market, which will hurt my holdings of Bitcoin, I can sell that to somebody over the counter at a premium, maybe 5% over market value, because they're not going through any KYC verifications. It's actually more convenient for them. So the convenience factor, right? So I make 5% on selling my Bitcoin rather than taking a cut on the market. And then I actually added 5% to my Bitcoin in my wallet that I'm storing because I added 5% to that trade. So you know what I mean? So Bitcoin's worth what you're willing to spend. So logically, that's what I strive for. And honestly, that has been kind of the hardest part in the bear market right now. Bull run, no problem. Bear market, it's been somewhat more difficult to find people to buy the Bitcoin I've been earning so I can pay my rent using that avenue. So I've had to take the integrity strike by using BitPay or shift payments and using Coinbase. BitPay differs. You have to sell your Bitcoin in advance to top up your debit card. Shift Payments actually pulls Bitcoin from your Coinbase account without pre-selling it. So I can store my value in Coinbase in Bitcoin or pretty much any currency that they support. And I could use that currency with my Visa card at the time of sale. They do a live conversion, which is really cool. It actually makes me feel a little bit better than BitPay, but then again, it's Coinbase, and it just makes me feel dirty all over again in a different way, just a different dirty. I guess it would be more like finding businesses that actually accept it, that don't just cash out right away. That's something I really look for. When I'm traveling, I've been to 50 conferences. So when I'm traveling, I'm actually on my phone and I'm using things like, Edge Wallet's original Airbits. I open up Airbits, I look at their glossary. They have this index of businesses that have applied to be listed, and there's other ways. I go on, like, there's Dash. If you go to dash.org, there's a way to find all the businesses that accept Dash and other cryptocurrencies. So I kind of look for that. And it was hard even in the bull market to find businesses that accepted it, even after they said they did on these websites. There's like a lot of misinformation, a lot of hit and misses with it, because they may have started to accept it in 2009 or something, and nobody ever used it, so they stopped accepting it. And
and it's just been sort of sitting
so
there
that misinformation, like vortex, if you will, has been a little bit of a mini nightmare. So I'm hopeful that somebody will solve this problem of trying to figure out what businesses accept Bitcoin. And I did have a guest on the podcast, and I've been trying to think in the back of my mind the name, but it is eluding me, and they were just on this week, so it is in the makings. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting, but there's so many avenues that I've learned to use to actually game spending crypto rather than fiat, that even in the bear market, I have actually either broken even or have benefited some profit by using these little tricks of actually spending my crypto rather than cashing out. Because if I use Purse.io and Bitcoin, I can save 30% on Amazon. And I've been doing that for years. And I actually, which is funny, I found, and I don't know what the heck they would consider this, but I guess this is a form of like weird trading escrow in a way. I save 30% on Amazon because I use Bitcoin. So I'll have my friends want to save 20%, and I'll take that 10% and put it in my pocket. I'll use my Bitcoin, they give me their fiat, and now I can pay my rent. See where I'm going? So like I found so many different avenues to take my money, use it as money, and make money out of my money by using it as money to get more money. That is the money that I use as money to make more money as money. It is fucking genius. But this is exactly what the banks don't want, which is why Goldman Sachs acquired Poloniex, kicked out U.S. residents from doing lending on the platform. And now you get your 0.01% from the bank, and you never get your 2% from Poloniex Bitcoin lending again. I mean, this is what's happening. But I mean, that's what I'm doing, is true peer-to-peer banking. When Andrea said be your own bank, I didn't think about just holding my money. I thought about what banks make. How do banks make money? They use money as money to make money, baby. So I figured that out. And like, I'm looking into Celsius.network as an avenue as well, because I'm a long-term holder. So if I'm holding Bitcoin on a wallet, like cash in a bank account, I want to start earning interest off of this. But I don't want to have the risk of my private keys being exposed. And what they're doing is like live interest. So I'm really looking into the future of this as Yeah, I will be my own bank, and every company will be their own bank, and the future of credit will be digital reputation. FICO will be as dead as Blockbuster. You know, if Netflix does not care if you owe Blockbuster any money, is what I'm saying. And the new error credit system won't give a shit if you owe FICO any money. So use your credit cards to buy all the crypto you want on Binance, and burn your credit cards like you're the Joker from Batman, because who cares? It's a legacy system that's dying anyway, and it's not going to be redeemable. You know, it's gonna happen overnight. Look at Venezuela, look at France, and what Wells Fargo has been going through recently. It doesn't look like the banking system in the U.S. is doing any better. So I'm trying to be personally like the beta tester of Bitcoin, the end user who hits every bug, and I report back the bugs. So when people come into the space, they have a better experience. And I pay a premium, you know, to use this beta technology and run into bugs. It's like buying the first iPhone that ever came out. You're gonna have a shitty experience, and you're gonna pay a lot of fucking money to have that shitty experience. And buying Bitcoin and using it right now is paying a premium to have a shitty experience. But what you're doing is you're gaining, you know, knowledge in the technology that will be ubiquitous in the future. You know, it's like buying a computer back when computers cost $5,000 for 5 MB of and you know, fractions of RAM. It paid off in the future when companies started hiring those guys, you know. So right now, all you need to know is how to do a basic stuff in this space, and you could land a role as an advisor. It's not going to be hard.
Fair. I like the argument too that early adopters, like even though you pay a premium to be an early adopter, it still funds companies that are being able to build really cool stuff and being able to build out the future.
We got a pop in chat, guys. Hey, guys, don't forget to share this live stream on social media. We are currently streaming right now on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, bit.to, which is a decentralized means of content storage. So if YouTube was to decide overnight that their terms and services don't allow for the talk of cryptocurrencies or whatever, and they want to call it terrorist money, they can do that. It's their company. So they could delete all the blockchain podcasts on YouTube like they did with the cannabis YouTube channels. Just wipe them out. So just, guys, if you're a content creator, make sure your stuff's on a blockchain somewhere and you're not feeding the machine of censorship and you know, centralization. Again, before we wrap up, why don't you let everybody know a little bit about where they can follow you and find you, and sort of like the elevator pitch, if you will, for outliercanada.com.
Sure. So on Twitter, I'm at outliercanada. So you can follow me there. Our website is outliercanada.com. If you have questions about anti-money laundering or privacy, feel free to hit me up. And I will say I am not a lawyer, so if your question is, hey, how do I launder money, or I'm doing illegal things, I'm not your Better Call Saul. But if you want to keep yourself out of trouble, I'm here for you.
Wow. If you are the crypto version of Better Call Saul, call me. I need you. I need the Better Call Saul of crypto today. All right, guys. Make sure you go ahead and check out outliercanada.com. Check out the website, then come back, drop a comment, and let me know what you think of the platform. Let me know what you think about, you know, what they're doing and the importance of it in this space. And maybe we don't need it, right? What about decentralized companies that can't be stopped because they're breaking regulations, and they are not AML compliant? Maybe they are helping people launder money. Who cares in a decentralized world when you can't sue a blockchain? You let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you, Amber. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, guys, pound that thumbs up button, click subscribe, flick the alert bell, and have a day.